Anyat usani. Shukwacht wasagu hatlilko hasti yukatangi chayegu genki khotli yechi. Gunas chish. Aku atletiwuch sati a. Gunas chish te kat yuhan. Klach kunach yuhan ya. Atletzin. Ye jineyi hayuch atangi dat klach kunach atletzin. Itutla ani dach haiti deshi. I atwasku wutin. Ha yitle yech. Chat aya yitle yech. Gunnel chish. Hadach hanki yes wush yejetune. Gunnel chish. Tlingit ayi ya conference. Achawayacht was a good tlingit yochatangi shukwa. Yata. Aka we kahatnach hasbu at hashagun. Kunach away haste to was a good tlingit yochatangi. Klach kunach shawodenek echi sati a gunnel chish a. I just wanted to start with some tlingit here. These are my teachers. This is an extremely distinguished group to sit with, and it just brings me great joy to think of the time and the energy that they have put in for our language. We're going to talk about language. We're going to react to our guest's keynote speech. And so first, I think maybe we'll just pass the mic down and just do introductions. And we'll just start with that. And then we'll have a chance to have reactions. And then we'll have a conversation. This is a conversation with, when we thought about who we would want on a panel like this, it was really hard. So I think the first thing I'd like to do is, we have teachers up here, but these are not the only ones. Those of you who have taught or are teaching Tlingit or Haida or Tsimshian, can you please stand up so we can recognize you? Gaidanak. Gunashisha, Gunashish. Kunachawe yak eyi yejeneyitu Gunashisha. Aksaya ya kune Gunashish. Yatlkutach aya uhan yatlukach adi. Yetleti du SOK ha hiti. Gunashish kunach aya. Stukach atati. Tach kunach ya yagi. Kar achtu yek e. Atjawe hastu khant ye khat yati Gunashish. My name is Lance Twitchell, or Khune. I would like to also recognize those of you who are speakers of our language. If you wouldn't mind just raising your hand up. If you speak, and we're not judging your abilities. If you speak the language, you speak the language. And those of you who are students of the language, go and put your hands up. That's what we need to see. Gunashish. Okay, so we're going to do introductions, and then we'll move into our conversation. I just wanted to try and get things moving here with some language and thoughts first.
I'm Leanne Hinton. I'm very honored to be here with all of these very distinguished speakers and knowers of the language. I'm just going to pass it on.
I'm Dick Dauenhauer. Tlingit kunach khaynak yukhat wasak akhsayitunach chukunedi khatzitik taktintan yadi kunalchish.
Kunalchish anyat kusani. Konakak tuyak khod ai khatso. Halwasa utishakte. Tjällingit enagi khatanke kolli akchi honch. Ja, jaya kocha ak. Ye inik akhla atke. Achtu yak ayak. Ja, which kana kotuta ati hayo katange. Katutlayakit. At katutlayek. At yak achtu yak Shikana 40 years ago, kakwa ako. Ita kaniwa yukatangi. Katuto ako school day. Wako aswas to inyo kautakak. Half a year old. Yes, katuwa kata huchi jini. Jana we dakhan. I'm very happy to be among you. I'll just cut it short. And I've been at it for 40 years, doing language, documenting, and collecting tapes from elders who I heard say, if only someone could write this from us. That just went in my ear. So I'm here again. I can't hear very well. I can't see very well. But I hope my partner does all of those well.
Good morning. Kuchta kashuya khato sakli git enach. Shao daneke. Dikia an kawa yetke. Kunalchish. Yaka wachiti ti. Yahay katanke. An hayatke kahadachkanke yan. An yasaka atat. As the Jintaka to tea. Kleda hino achlik eaka. Iyukatanga ya kay sakate. Ikusti okay kati. Achaya kakaak. Yak tachkankayan kakyatke. Kay ay yatke kay tachkankayan. As the kakayis. Ushko tlaadea hayukatanke. It was my grandmother, Alice Lee, that told me, if you forget your language, something's going to be wrong in your life. I believe it. And I believe it. And I really believe in God. I can't go before you without God. I'll go into a little story, but I'll make it short. One time I was fishing in Chilkat. I had a boatload. I wanted a little more, so I was going up against the north wind. When I opened the door, the water just flushed right into the cabin. My boat sunk with me. I ran up to the front of the bow. I was drinking. God will hear you in any condition. He's not going to listen just to the one that is walking behind him. He'll hear you at any time. 5 o'clock in the morning. The one fish tender never comes out until 12 o'clock in the afternoon. 5 o'clock in the morning, he came over and saved my life. That was God. That was God. I praise the Lord for it. And I know you folks have different churches you go to. Keep it up and believe that God will do it for you. Cheers.
Yak zu tat, ach atas ach sani hasrasiti. To our relatives from the interior Yukon, Teslin, welcome to the homeland of the Wishkitan and the Elk tribe. Kasech yuchat de wasak, angundach de shitan ayachat, kagwantan yadi, yel hit ach kahidi. Thank you very much for the opportunity to express our feelings this morning about our language. We treasure them because we cherish them. We want to pass on our language, our culture, our way of life. Goodness cheese.
Shaudeneke, Tachwasa tu sigu yadi khatine, ach frenze la katjedach. Kuna hatuk energy itutine, yaha yuk atangi kai ako. Das dia yu ayachatu asak an kuchtiti sa ayach. Look nach sha ayachat kagwantanya de khatsiti. Heit atina kagwantanya de khasiti. Tachwasa hatuk energy. At the shea kagwantanyat kede. Kudach atut lechnut. Hatu sigu kai ako hayuk atange. Diki an kaut kaya hajit uatia hayuk atange. Aya kai ako kunach yak Ach naka hidit look hit yedo asak Jesus sheet kak. I'm so happy to see all of you here, my friends from the Yukon and everywhere else, Yakutat and all the places that we travel, working with our language. Our language was God-given to us. I don't see why it should disappear from us. I have tried for 20 years to teach, and hopefully that I'm glad to see the hands that went up that are learners, and those that are talkers are real happy to see your hands go up. Guna chish achjiti yagal.
Hatsu achtwasigu gunal chish tlakat yuhan. Shawa de neki katsu anyat usani. Yek ewe achtu yek yadach walqini. Gunal chish. Gunevti ye khatdu asak. We saw we achjit waduati gwell ach katagu dachadushu 7 years old dach. Guneuti is my Tlingit name, and it was given to me at that. I'm named after Nellie Willard, and I want to mention her because she was a translator. And she translated in the church, and she translated outside. She went back and forth. And sometimes as I was growing up, my gram didn't quite understand all, and so they saw me trying to explain something to her, and which I would try to tell her. I do remember doing that. But I've been teaching in school, in the community, and especially in my community. want to acknowledge Joe Uchdakashu is one of my mentors these past 10 years. Gunilchish Atlin, Achiti Dishi. And so have all these, Nora, Richard, and Leanne has been my mentor in a different way, and Alice Taff, and Roy Mitchell, because one of the things is I understand Tlingit, but the speaking part came as I began to really learn. I mean, I could talk in my home, but also knowing the language and teaching it, I figured out was two different ball games. And so with the training that Sea Alaska had provided several years ago that empowered a lot of us that are in our communities to try to take our language into the schools. And Ethel and them have set a wonderful example for us. And Leanne was up here several years ago, and when the Mentor Apprentice book first came out, it was still with the publishers when she came up and did that workshop up here. And so we were one of the first ones to crack open those books when they came out of the and we did run a mentor apprentice program in Tlukwan. We did that for about 3 years and different other grants, so programs. Atlain Gunilchish. And I'm very excited that our clan conference, and I think about Andy and the vision that he had for us as a region, as a Tlingit nation, as Alaska Natives. And when he was taken, when he went on, thank you, Jerry, for stepping in that role. I know the shoes were big. Gunilchish. Gunilchish.
Yukea. Gunilchish awaits to cut you on. I had a couple of thoughts while the microphone was going through. The first was, we're on our way. There's going to come a day where we don't have to translate these things that we're saying. If this is a conference of Tlingit clans and tribes, then I think it's time to issue the challenge. Let's do this in Tlingit. If you want to study Tlingit people and cultures, say it in Tlingit. If it takes 2 years, if it takes 4 years, if it takes 6 years, let's just switch over. This is our language. This is our thing to take care of. So those were the thoughts that I had going through, and I would like to issue that challenge. I would like for us to put that on the table as a goal and say, we don't have to be translating all the time. It's a great honor to be sitting with you and to have Leanne here. We've studied your work for a long time, so it's very neat to have you just sitting right next to us. I feel like I'm in Hollywood. I'm in the Hollywood of linguistics. So before we open it up to questions, I want to run the microphone through one more time so you guys can have reactions to the keynote speech, specifically some of the things that were being talked about, revitalization, language teams, language families, language in the home, these types of things. So if you had specific thoughts for Leanne, and then I've got some questions that we can just sort of open it up to more of a panel discussion. But I just wanted to have a chance to have specific comments to our guests before we open it up for general discussion. And those were mine, is that and those of you who are raising your hands as speakers, as you're raising your hands as learners, the reason I like to do things like that is because you should look at the room, and now when you see that person, you speak to them in the language. That's got to be your challenge. It's very easy to switch over and just say, oh, well, let's just do this in English now, because we said hello in Tlingit. But let's switch over. And, and I think we can do that. There'll be misfires all the time, but you just deal with it. You'll see someone in Tlingit, you'll be like, how you doing? And they'll say, it's raining. And you just kind of roll with it. It's like, yeah, it's raining. Let's talk about the weather. Or there'll be times when you're not making sense, or the idea is not to be grammatically flawless, but the idea is to be able to communicate what's in your spirit, and what's in your spirit is our language. So those were my thoughts, and then we'll just do one more run through, and take as much time as you want. Leave it to Tlingits to talk for 15 minutes and say, I'm going to keep this brief. We do have until noon, and you're the ones that we really want to hear from.
I'm afraid I can't rise to the challenge, but I would say, in the immortal words of John Kennedy, that the torch has been passed to a new generation. So I'm very proud of Lance and Ishmael and Carrie. I mean, all of my students have done far better than I have, so I'm very proud. And the work that Hans has been doing in the schools, and Mary Folletti and all of y'all. I'd like to take maybe a slightly different approach. What I was very excited about, we've been with the mentor apprentice and all of that, but the documentation, those people that are working with languages that are totally extinct and trying to reconstruct from home, like with the Miami, and with Yuchi is not quite there, but it's another good example where doing. And one of the things that has interested me since the beginning, when I was trained in European languages, so Russian and German and classical Greek and all of that, and coming to Alaska, I was really excited about what happens at the intersection of oral literature and literacy. So, for example, the Homeric epics, they've been around for thousands of years. The Greek anthology, I tell people when I get too tired, I go back to Greek poetry, ancient Greek love poetry. It's been around for a couple of thousand years. So, the fact that those documents, in some cases they're pretty strange scribblings of some very strange linguists, but they're there. And one of the things that's been great for our Western European tradition is that at a particular moment, when writing was introduced in Hebrew and in Greek and in English for Beowulf, things like that, we have those documents. And so what Nora had been doing was working with elders, collecting the tapes, and the people, as Nora said, that. But anyhow, the people that were telling Nora, wouldn't it be great if this could be written down? And so a lot of my effort has been on trying to leave that record while the language was still alive and well, and we could talk with the elders about that. And I'm happy to see also that some of this is becoming a model, like for public speaking, for example, and hearing a lot more people, because we've had the problem with oratory is it's always live in performance, unlike a story or a song. It only exists when it's being performed in a particular setting. But we have those examples of that learners can turn to those. So how do you tell a story in Tlingit? How do you tell, how do you make a speech? So that's the thing I'll comment on, and the rest possibly later, but that it's possible in some of these cases to to bring those, back to life, to breathe new life into that. And we do have a lot of that stuff out there in Tlingit. There's still tremendous amount of manuscripts that we need to work on. Ethel and Robbie have done marvelous with one of the stories, the Aquatat scene, and Ishmael has performed that we had that in John Swanton's writing system. But to go over that, and there are a lot of funny stories where things that Swanton didn't quite get right, but they could bring that back, and there's a lot more stories out there. But I'll pass on that. Thank you.
My involvement with Tlingit came 40 years ago. I was asked to teach Tlingit from the high school here in Juneau. And during my time here, I spent half a year teaching Tlingit to my students. There was 14 of them. And my teaching led one of the linguists to come and visit my classroom, who had been working in Angoon with the speakers and elders over there. And we became known as Tlingit class. We exhibited our art in the case that had, you could exhibit anything you want there. And we did that as a class. And it turned out real good. We had chilkat blanket, button blanket, hats, and stuff like that in the case. It turned out really good, like I said. And after that, I got dismissed from my job. I don't know why. They never told me why I got dismissed. That was half a year. Anyway, I know why, but we don't talk about it, culture to culture. So I didn't do anything about it. But in the meantime, we got invited to go and dance. I belonged to the dance group, Mark's Trail Dancers. And we went up to Anchorage. We got invited there during the time that the Native American group was up there. So we all went up there. There was about 12 of us. And that's where I met Dick. My friend introduced me to him. And there was nothing to think about it. It was just...
The rest is history.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
Yeah, we ended up being married. Anyway, it was good. It's been a good life. 40 years worth of life together. We produced many books in Tlingit and in English. I did the Tlingit and Dick did his English expert, so he did the English, I did the Tlingit. And that was the end of our work together. We're still doing the work together from time to time. Anyway, I'm having a hard time catching my memory. In the college that Dick was, they accepted me as a student. They had open door policy, so I entered. And in the meantime, I didn't go to school at all, but I did get GED while I was teaching the kids, and they'd help me with whatever problem I had, they'd help me. So I got my GED, and when I went up to Anchorage and entered the college, they just accepted me. And I ended up being a student and graduating. So I have a college degree. Thank you. And while I was doing my college, my main project was Tlingit. I started to continue to work on my project as I started. I was doing Tlingit oratory. Tlingit oratory is Kankik Yukatank. Some people told me it's Kankik Yukatank, talking by the fire. And I did oratory from my uncle's memorial party. I did all of them. There was about 5 or 6 of them. I can't remember. I'm going to do them over here for you folks. I hope you attended. And I did all of that, and then I ended up my memory again. You know, the thing you have to do is do important stuff while you're young and you have your memory. Otherwise, you're gonna go like me. Thank you. Anyway, I think I'll stop here. Joe?
Chief. The language that we want to retain was not lost intentionally. Bureau of Indian Affairs discouraged our language in schools. Some of our people moved from fish camps to the school area, and then they told our native people, you abandoned that place. It's still our place. I took some of that medicine that the Bureau gave us. If we spoke our own language, they had to put soap on our tongues. And the one in Ketchikan I heard about, a young boy smoke in Tlingit. He was below zero. And the teacher took him outside and put his tongue on the pipe. His tongue froze to the pipe. We are going a long ways by retaining our language. We're not going to give up. We're not going to give up. I'd like to end by the comments by the late Thomas Yen Sr. from Sitka. His relatives went down to hear their history of the family. And one of them took a tape recorder out. He said, "Put that away. What I'm going to tell you, I want you to have it up here. I want you to have it in your mind, not on a recorder. If we depend on a recorder, it's going to hurt us. Our children is going to have a hard time trying to learn. But if we tell them face to face what we want to teach them, we'll make it. We will make it. Yeah, we're going to teach.
Gonna cheese, Sonny. Gonna cheese, Miss Hinton. Gonna cheese for your showing us that we are not alone, that other languages have been lost. Because we cherish our children and grandchildren, we are standing up for them today. And will continue to do so as long as we have any fluent speakers left amongst us. I would like for the young teachers in the schools to please stand and be recognized. Any native teachers? Goodness cheese. Goodness cheese. It would have been a sad day here in Alaska if we didn't have our cherished elders that are gone, that saw to it that we know and speak our language, to hear it every day in the house. And to this day, I am so sorry I did not teach my children growing up. I was too busy earning a living. And I know I'm not alone when I say that. The day will come when we'll say, I wished I had taught my children. I tried teaching my grandchildren. How proud I was, I almost cried when I heard my grandson speak. He's now in college in Anchorage. And our children, because we care for them so deeply, we do not want our language to disappear from anywhere. When we lose our language, we have lost our culture. We have lost our songs. We have lost our dances. And to this day, I will always thank our elders that speak, the elders that I knew and grew up with. Sometimes I get very emotional at the loss of my grandmothers. I could still feel to this day how much they cherished us. They taught us right from wrong. They taught us to be careful of how we treat each other. Respect above everything. To honor your elders. To love your mom and dad and grandmas. Like Emery. Jacobs said, just because there's a line between us. I'm talking to my brothers and sisters from Yukon Interior. Gunalchish Deshitan. I know I have a lot of Deshitan people I met, and how appalled is not the word, surprised I was when they were speaking my language. I didn't know that we had them up there. Is it because they were trying to teach us not to our language, but to speak only English? I wiped that away. I wiped it from my mind. I went to Sheldon Jackson. My brothers, Cyril, George, Kenny, Jeff David, all those guys, to say a word in our language, they used to jump up in the air on the campus. Otherwise, they would have been punished, they said. So this day and age, how happy it makes me that we are here because we care. Gunalchish, to Andy Hope, to Metcalf, to all those that care enough to put this conference, the clan conference, on. Gunalchish.
Chatsal Tuasigu, Inka Khaniki. 20 years I SNP program. I worked 20 years with a SNP program, and I guess you all knew Isabella Brady, who I worked for. And the young people that I worked with are already older than me. And one of them is Nancy Eddy. The program that she has through the school district is something else. And I have two young ladies here that are with me that are doing the language. Angie, would you stand up so they can see you? Angie, Kita, and Jamie Bradley. They're readers and writers of the language. The STEP program was really good for the young people at that time. And every once in a while when I see some of our former students, of course they're never going to stay children. One of the fellows that I met one day says, Dastia, it's good to see you. And I didn't recognize him, and he stood back and he said, Kleek, Deeg, Nuts, Dakun. So I knew he was one of my students. And I'd like to tell you about the program that I worked with. And I was hired to teach the song and dance because my father was Charlie Joseph, and I worked with him on teaching the young people how to do their songs and the dance. And then I found out that, Isabel found out that I can speak fluent Tlingit, so she put me in the language program. I wasn't one of the teachers that learned how to read and write the language, but I picked it up from Nellie Lord. You know, they went to this Sheldon Jackson to learn how to do their reading and writing system. I've enjoyed talking with Nora and Dick for years, and I'd like to recognize Florence Shakely. Florence has done a wonderful job with a lot of the young people. The teachers that she taught are working in the school district, and that's real wonderful. I grew up with my language. I was fortunate enough that my parents didn't leave the language behind. I come from 9 of us in my family. I was right in the middle of everybody. My older siblings didn't know how to speak English when they started school. So from them, we started learning how to speak English. When I started school, our principal was working for the elders with Social Security, and there was 3 of us that would go in there and interpret for the elders. And one of my friends, they called her in and to interpret for the principal, and this little old lady was mad because she didn't get her Social Security. She hadn't got it for a long time, and it was the principal's fault because he wasn't working on it. And he said, "Well, I'm very busy," and he went on and all the things he did. And so the old lady said, "Kunach seuke ilis ake, ye seuke adjati," and he asked the person I was interpreting, "What did she say?" She said, "You're pretty bony." And that's what it really meant, that he was a busy person. He said, "You're pretty," but we were 7 years old and 8 years old. I've had a really good time working with young people, teaching them song and dance. It's rewarding to see what comes out of them. And through the years, through the STEP program, we have, I still work with a dance program. My dance group is called the New Clan, and I have a lot of the SNP young people that have followed me to this group, and they come every celebration here. We love to share our culture with everyone. It's so wonderful to see you all here, and anytime that you see us, we're willing to answer some of your questions.
I want to back up a little bit. Achtwasigu yiin kachwaniki. Shugwanach helk ideen chwasiku. Ideen chwa acht kwa. Ja, achoniwe ach chitlak achjit kanada tanjin. Ja, school day ha in adenagu ya linget yukatangi wutusiku isiku ag ka in ku atlatu. Hel achtwawishku ade chwagudi. Chwasiku ku a achyatki chitlak yagi ade hasna ach. Chat ku a ade chwagudi chitle ach tuwu. Lilwasiku lingit kainach. I would get just shaky inside when I would go to the school. Wanach siya ach tuwu yenanich. Akawe kakwa ak ade chwagut. Kakwa ak ya kechne hastu guk adachawe how kaunduji chidea gwalt ayachawe yeti hiltsuk ideen chwatu hiltsu chwashiguk ach si owe ach in kawanik itle isikucha Lingit yugatangi. Wanach sawe leth itu. Du in kachwanik je ach neil gawe. Chwa ach. Yechadus gengi. Awe we kuk kag account shichit ach jies poster ach jies only yech. We kitchen owe we ayat ad awati achjies cook ikle yadu a shtu iltu agawe adachawe ya tlingit kashidi adach shtu chwas chwasiku I was asked to teach at the school in Tlakwan, but I could not go to the school. No. What I have to share is, I feel it's important. Sheesh. I would go to the school, but I couldn't go into that environment without my insides would just feel uncomfortable. But I couldn't identify it. And as the See Alaska Heritage got involved, and I began to hear that things were happening in different places. I think there was one workshop that they held, and my boss would come into my office, Marsha, what are you doing working in human resources? You should be involved with this language. We know you speak, and I couldn't get involved. But when I finally did make my mind up to go up to the school to teach, but I found out, oh, there's a book, but I couldn't read it. I mean, I could read the English, but I knew how to say it translating it. So my daughter, who's a she's a mom now and she has children of her own, but she made me a poster. And she made the orthography and she put pictures on it and said, Mom, there it is. And she put it up in the kitchen for me. And because she wanted me to help out with the Tlingit language. So it was just kind of those kinds of prodding. But you know that feeling that I had down deep inside of me. Language is a core of who we are. I spoke it in the home, but we were children. You guys know what I'm talking about. We were to be there and not to make a lot of noise, or you couldn't even get into the conversation because then it wasn't your place as a young person. And so I was always with the elders. Tom Jimmy, Achlil Annie, his wife, Jimmy Fox, some of you guys know him as Weha or Anya Lahash. Those were and my mom and dad, and they were born in 1904 and 1906. I was fortunate. I was put with elders. So with that, and then attending some of the workshops that See Alaska had, and every time I tried to talk, I cried. I couldn't get through, and I couldn't understand that. But you know what? One day I just started praying in Tlingit, and I kept talking and talking by myself. But you know what it was? It's that core of who we are that wasn't wanted around. There was no place for that. And so when I would leave my home, it was like walking into a different world. I remember going into school and not speaking very good English. I had English around me, but I was limited, I guess, because I was sent home and my folks were told they needed to speak more English with me. And because of that, our home went quiet, very quiet. But my dad did make his mind up, I was going to learn it anyway. So before I could really get involved, there was a healing process that had to happen within me. And to find that voice that my grandma, my mom, and when I speak Tlingit, it's not me. It feels like that it's them, because that's where I hastuji dachawa. And I know some people say maybe we don't want to hear about that. Well, you know what? How can some of us get beyond that if we weren't given the opportunity to allow that healing process to happen? And those are some of the things I know that might have held some of our speakers back. There's that kind of treatment, and it's traumatic. And it's something that some of us made it by. And then the other part was not teaching my children. That one really hurts. Because I became a student at UAS in 2002. And I wanted to be involved in language. I walked in, I became a PETA student, and we had to set our goals, and I didn't know anything. I thought, oh, I got to get my degree, I'm going to teach. And they asked you what your goals were. I said, well, I want to teach Tlingit language. And, you know, I made my mind up. I was not going to be a history teacher. I wasn't going to be an English teacher. I wasn't going to do any of that. I wasn't going to be a math teacher. I'm going to be a Tlingit language teacher. And this is what I had to do. And little did I know that there's so much more. You know what our elders put into us, imparted unto us, we can't really get in a university. But we can get the skills to get on with it and make it work at a faster rate. And that's why I acknowledge those other mentors, the linguistic, who have helped us tremendously. And when I started studying, I began to realize as you start to research, I thought, oh my goodness, history has a funny way. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but this is the way it works in my brain. History has a funny way of tattletaling on itself. And when I think about the history of our region, and I'm pretty sure this is probably what Andy realized, is Leanne said, there's a new book, there's a new book. What are we going to put in it? But it's sort of like, oh my goodness, my grandchildren could be going to school, and all this stuff is here. You can research the documents. You can go back and look at history. You can look at legislative, what happens in there and what kind of decisions were made over us. And it's sort of like, my thought was, our next generations are going to look back, and our language is on the verge of going extinct if we don't band together. And I said, I am going to get involved, and I am going to do what I can till there is no breath left. I made that decision, and when I made that decision, I had to go back to my children, and I had to ask them each, I'm going to be involved in the language, I'm going to teach language, and I never gave it to you. And I asked their forgiveness for that. I couldn't go beyond. It's sort of like doing what... And they were all excited for me except for my one son. I didn't hear from him. And just to make this long story short, and I went back and I asked him about it. And he says, Mom, how can you go out and teach total strangers when you never even... That's the core of who you are. You never even shared that part of your life with us. And I felt bad. I had to go back and rethink about it. You know, I never shared that. How our language suffered. And it wasn't our fault. It wasn't. And I think everybody's just trying to make a move on. But as I went back and I shared it with him, he understood more what we went through. And only then can he understand. And Yeah, Mom, I think it's a good thing. And I asked him if I could share it because it's our healing as a family and moving on. And then being involved in language projects, learning how to document, I had no clue. But we did it. We did the best we could, you know, in my community, in Tlukwan. And I am also back in school. I'm working on my degree at the same time. I'm also teaching at the university along with Lance. We teach different courses, and it's been fun. So it's been a journey. But you know, I'm excited about those blank pages coming up. I'm excited for the next generation and those of you that are learning. And I like what Leanne said. If those learners would take another learner, if we made that commitment, I believe the next generations, we're going to hear it. We're going to hear them.
I'll say one more thing. I forgot to acknowledge my friend over there, Kutlek. I work with her all the time, and she teaches at middle school in Sitka, the Tlingit language. Kutlek, Gidan. I told her, "Hetlach jidik akidatan, yagituna hakustia and a hihe." I said, "Don't call me when days of our life is on." But she forgets and always calls me. I'd like to acknowledge Nakitlan. For, you know, I remember him when he was a little guy, when we were at Dog Point, when he was learning the language, and I know that he was one of Florence's students, and how well you did, and it's proud that I am of you. And also, I'd like to say before I give this mic back that I was very proud of Lance and his speech at AFN, and his talking made me cry. It was so good.
You made us cry, Lance.
Mr. Moderator, give me a few moments. I'd like to say that our language is built on respect. It's strongly built on respect, not only of persons, but also your equipment. If you're a carver, you respect your tools. If you're a gill netter, respect your net. I brought this up at Hayes when the tour ship came in, and one of the tourists from California, he came over and thanked me. He was a big construction owner. He said, "Thank you for saying that you respect your tools. I will respect my tools now." So thank you, Mr. Moderator. Cheers.
I hope we still have time. Anyway, I found the books I didn't tell you that were worked on by the Angoon linguists. I thank the Angoon people for letting them work with them. This was a very wonderful thing for them to do. And one of the ladies who was working out there as a linguist heard about me, and she came to visit me. And I was washing clothes. I turned off my washer, and we talked. in Tlingit. Her Connie Nash, was that her name? Yeah, Connie Nash was the woman. They're now in England, living there. I am just happy that they were able to work with the people. Some folks don't like being worked with. They always say, do. I say, don't. I spoke in Tlingit at one time. I want to tell you this. And I got spanked with a wooden ruler on my hands. And I think my father heard about it. He didn't ask me, though. He just took us out to dry fish camp when it was school time. Took us out of school. He told us not to go out on the deck of the boat, because this marshal will see us. We were afraid of marshals. And he went to Chamawa schools and saw how badly the people were treated, the students were treated while he was there. I'm thinking we were taken out of school by him because of what he saw. Took us all out of school. And for that reason, I didn't go to school. I did go to school, but it was for a week, 2 weeks. And then we'd go out in the camp. And that was my life. Thank goodness he took us out. All we did was talk Tlingit. It was an immersion camp. My grandmother, my grandfather, all my uncles and my aunties, and my father and mother all spoke Tlingit. And when it came time to tell stories, they talked in Tlingit. They did it in Tlingit all the time. They were telling the stories. And when they talked about the stories, they had a discussion about it. They did it in Tlingit. And then there was baby songs, lullabies. There were dance songs. All of them were taught to us in Tlingit. I thank you.
I know we're getting toward the end, but I'd like to just say a couple of words to Marsha especially. Thank you. I think that the historical trauma is probably the greatest problem that we have. Technically, we've got all of the gimmicks, the devices, the teaching methods, and that's all there for the languages. What's also still there, unfortunately, is the historic trauma that virtually every family has experienced, and even learners. I mean, one of my little traumas is how many times are being accused of stealing the language. And that kind of dimmed, my enthusiasm. This is, I'm again going back 40 years ago and say, okay, I've got other languages I can steal. I can steal Hebrew, I can steal Greek, I can steal Russian. Sergei's never complained about my stealing Russian. But these are, I joke, but it's a serious thing, and I'm glad that Marsha's focused on this, because either the trauma that people people who have spoken have experienced, or their children, the families, the fallout of that. So I just want to, I'm glad that Marsha put that on the table, because it's I think, probably the hardest thing in restoring languages and all of that is to get over those problems, and then all of the materials are there, the resources are there, but what do we do with them? Thanks.
I also, yes, sorry. I also would like to comment on Marsha's presentation, which I think was very important. The pain that became associated with the language when your ancestors were denied being who they were by the authorities in the schools. It was very widespread in very many people, and Marsha's whole generation and a generation before that and a generation after that had that pain and did not pass the language on for many reasons. And it wasn't just that they were feeling pain, but they did not want their children to feel that pain. And so it to a large extent, it was an act of love, not speaking the language to their children. And yet those children are now the ones that are wanting their language, and that is such a positive movement. I mean, when I was starting out, I trace my starting in 50 years ago. And I was working with the Havasupais at the time. And when I was starting out, there were a lot of speakers who were language activists and language teachers. They were just starting out in bilingual education and bringing the language back to the schools that had denied the language for so long. I mean, it was a major political act to do that. But they weren't even teaching their kids the language. That's sort of the last thing that's happening, is finally bringing the language back into the home again. So I also wanted to just say a word about documentation too. I agree, you have so much documentation, thanks to the Dauenhauers, thanks to many people who have shared their language, so that there will be a record, even when they're gone, that can be used forever. And I actually I'd like to give a acknowledgement to Alice Taff for the most recent kind of documentation that's just come out, a couple of months ago on the web publicly, that so many of you, Nora and many other people, shared in, and that was the documentation of everyday conversation. And that's something that's so needed for language revitalization. It's something that didn't used to be documented at all. And not only was it beautifully documented, but it was videotaped, and there's running translation and transcription of the as that sort of goes along with it. And I just think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So thanks to all of you for that incredible documentation. And I also want to say one final word as a linguist. I believe that thanks to all the people in all the communities that in North America and elsewhere that linguists have been working with, that their move toward language revitalization has also been a move of demanding accountability by linguists for doing something that's useful to the community instead of just something that's useful to other linguists. And I believe that linguistics has gone through a major change, and that the younger generations of linguists have a much stronger feeling of the heart of language and the and the humanness of language as opposed to the form of language. And so I believe that you and people from other languages and other communities have been educating linguistics in a way that I am very grateful for. Thank you. Guna shish.
Gwella gawu ayagi dat. Ja, ich ki aya. Shedeheni atlinget yachjeti. Tau yat aya. Ja, hast du Anne Kachaway? Ja, Audagan aya konach. Aka hast du gawu gwall aya we kakan. Klinget Anne koa. Akach away kutla goots nuch. Gwall ha gawu aya we goots. Ako atlech wasatin achawe gwall ya. Kuyat ayawe hayukatangi ta ade ye hanai ulta kat yohan ako eka acht wasagu ya gwall atsu yitlingit chinach at yachyati kun gausaya ha ya tu wadlak Huchawe hayukatangi Ako hatunda tani gayati yasakit yach kahatuwu gayati tsu sakit yach at hayugatangi achtuwasagu takat hatuwu dach ayayak yakanadain kunachawit takat yuhan. I really hope we're going to pull those barriers out. Ha'itas de shi aya hatagu kwankiyan. We're going to ask our ancient ones to help us to pull those things out of us, those barriers. I don't believe that Tlingit people were cynical. And I think that's one of the things we need to be aware of, so that when you see somebody doing something, you're really supporting that person. You're thinking that person is going to succeed, and then I'm going to succeed. Too often, I think we practice cutting each other down a little bit too hard. But I really want to thank you guys for your time. I want to thank this panel. I think we could just sit here all day and just keep doing this. The last thing I did want to mention, I think Representative Christ Tompkins stepped out, but his office is going to introduce legislation this coming session that's going to propose that Alaska Native languages all be the official languages of the state of Alaska. In addition, will be support for language nests, which would be daycare centers and places where we can just go to speak our languages, and also exploring how to possibly eliminate the tuition question when it comes to languages at the university. And in closing, there's lots of Kagwantan Yetki up here, just little babies of our Kagwantan people. But I want to just touch on one thing that Joe said is we didn't choose to give our language away. There's state and federal and church responsibility behind that. There were people being paid to come here and to take away something that we had that makes us who we are. So at some level, there's been land claims, but at some other level, we need to stop waiting for soft money to come, so we're always so busy chasing money that we're not spending enough time just speaking. So, yeah, we're gonna chish to cut you, hon.
And the other comment I hear is they're getting rich from it.
Gunners cheese sit got san ya, which away.
Nora, I heard you say you're getting rich from our language, but I want to say this. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth with us. You have given us a lot. So thank you very much, Gunnar Chief, as well as Richard. Okay.